Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studio in Atlanta, Georgia. It's time for Atlanta Business Radio. Brought to you by Kennesaw State University's Executive MBA program, the accelerated degree program for working professionals looking to advance their career and enhance their leadership skills. And now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Atlanta Business Radio, and this is going to be a good one. But before we get started, it's important to recognize our sponsor, KSU's Executive MBA program. Without them, we couldn't be sharing these important stories. Today on Atlanta Business Radio, we have an old friend, Bob Littell, with NetWeaving International. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Lee. So great to see you again.
I am so excited to get caught up. Please get us caught up. What's been going on in your world?
Well, you had kind of said, give everybody who may not be familiar with the NetWeaving concept a little background. This is a 25-year-old concept. And the reason why I actually came up with it initially, and I'm sure that a number of your listeners can identify with being in a large room, and what you're sort of expected to do is to have these conversations with a bunch of people and find the perfect prospect for you. That's the goal of most people who go into a networking event of any kind. Well, frankly, I just felt uncomfortable doing that. And so what I started doing is I would have brief conversations with people, and I try and get around to 5, 10, 15 people. But what I try to do is find people, frankly, who I just liked talking with. And frankly, after having a short conversation, and then I'd move on to someone else, and almost invariably, I'd find somebody who all of a sudden I said, you know what, I just had a conversation with Joe over there, and I think the two of you would really enjoy meeting, and I'd drag him over or her over and introduce the two. And so what I just found that I got my real enjoyment out of being in a networking event by just having good, friendly conversations with people. And if I had a short conversation with someone who was all about, well, let me tell enough about you talking about me. Why don't I talk about me for a while? And it just got a little overwhelming. So NetWeaving reverses the traditional concept of networking. Instead of asking yourself the questions, can this person help me? Do they know somebody I need? Do they have resources or information that would be helpful to me? NetWeaving just flips that around, and you train yourself to ask yourself, who do I know who might benefit meeting or getting to know this person? Or secondly, what resources or information do I have or someone in what we call my trusted resource network that, once again, might be useful and might actually help develop and create a trusted relationship with this individual? So that's kind of the basics. But the action step of NetWeaving really entailed setting up meetings, usually a one-on-one first, and then at that one-on-one meeting, trying to identify someone who they would really like to meet and setting up and hosting that particular meeting. And that's how some of these, what I call ripple effect stories, and we can talk about some of those later, how they took place is that I'd make some introduction and then host a meeting, and then they would turn around and host a meeting for someone else. And it just created this ripple effect of positive energy that ended up being some amazing things. So that's the short description.
And I think a key component of it is really the intent, right? When you go to one of these events where there's lots of business people, some people historically have gone there with the intent of, I have to find that golden ticket person that's going to buy my stuff. And when you go there with the intent, like you're describing, and you're like, I'm just here to meet people and connect people, it takes all the pressure off, and it just makes it a much more enjoyable event.
Yeah, I'm very proud to say, in fact, I'm getting ready to have a Zoom call with him later on this week, is my good friend Jeffrey Gitomer, the world famous speaker and crazy guy. Jeffrey one time quoted in one of his conferences saying, Bob Littell is the only person who I've ever met who totally gets what networking really should be all about.
So now
and I didn't have to pay him either.
That's a bonus. So you've been doing it for 25 years. You were kind of in a break for a period, and then you've relaunched.
Yeah. Well, you're a perfect classic example of what we're doing today. The most powerful form of NetWeaving, as I said before, you first have someone who you met at one of these meetings. And the one or two people that you want to follow up with, I make notes on the back of their business cards so that when I send them an email, I almost always try and reference some comment that they made. Then I call up and assuming that it's somebody that I want to set up a one-on-one hosting meeting, a one-on-one meeting, just the two of us. Then when I decided that this is someone I'd like to introduce to someone else, that's where the real difficulty starts. Because in the old days, almost all the meetings were in person. And the higher up you go in power and influence, the more that you find difficulties in scheduling. Busy business schedules, travel to and from the meeting, setting up and picking the place where you're going to meet. And frankly, the reason why I sort of got discouraged was how few people were recognizing the power of hosting meetings to make the introduction of two people. Because what often would happen is a lot of the connections I was making, frankly, were above my pay grade. And when you hosted those kind of meetings, in many cases, it allowed me to get invited into a whole new network of people who, frankly, I had not been involved with prior to that. And so consequently, when Zoom came along, and when all of a sudden I realized that I could set up one or two or three Zoom meetings. This is my second. I'll have two more Zoom meetings this week, because now it's as easy to set up a meeting or to host a meeting to make an introduction of two different people as it is sending a text or an email. And that's why I wrote an article that maybe I'll send you a link that you could include in the post information that's sent out, a two-part article in Sales and Marketing Magazine on why NetWeaving is exploding in popularity now, and it's largely because of the ability of Zoom and other forms of virtual online face-to-face communication.
Now, when things are done virtually versus in person, are there some kind of tips or tactics or advice you can share to get the most of the virtual meeting? Because a lot of times in person, obviously, there's the energy of people in a room together. There's all the subtle cues. Are there some things that you can share that can help somebody have a more effective virtual meeting?
Yeah, hiring dancing women to be in the background can really be effective.
That helps? Okay, wait, I'm writing that down. Wait.
It is more expensive. It is, what I find is that the virtual meetings do not take that much away from an in-person meeting if you handle the meeting correctly. Now, what do I mean by that? The first thing is, when you have the one-on-one conversation with the individual, you're trying to find out who are key people that this person would like to meet. And what's surprising is, in many cases, this is not somebody who I know. They tell me someone who they would really love to meet. And in many cases, especially if it's a high level individual, what I will do is I will ask them to send me their bio. And then I will send that bio along with an email, knowing that my first conversation, if it's a high level individual, is not going to be with the individual. It's going to be with his executive assistant. And so I would start out by saying, I'm sorry, but what is Barbara. Barbara, hopefully you remember I sent an email and I copied you on it about an individual who I think your boss would really enjoy meeting. The two of them have very similar backgrounds, and they're working on some projects that I think might be of interest to both of them. And so I'm wondering if this is someone who you think, based on the bio, if you would share that with him, would like to meet, and I'll check back with you and see if, and almost always, then after they look up the bio, if I've done my homework correctly, it's almost always would love to have that meeting, be so nice to set it up, and then that's all there is to it. So it's being creative in the way you set it up, listening, and it's a puzzle. It's putting pieces of a puzzle together of what is a meeting and a communication. For example, I'm hosting a second meeting this week, and this one's in person. I'm putting together a fellow who's with one of the senior VP of one of the largest construction companies in Atlanta, and putting together with someone who literally helped run 6 of Ted Turner's companies back in the heyday of when Ted Turner was just doing unbelievable things and buying companies and doing all sorts of stuff. I was amazed that the two of them didn't know each other, from just the fact that both of them were so high profile in Atlanta. And once again, they both have a high interest in cars. And so the two of them, I can't wait to be part of the conversation.
Now, is that a mistake that people make a lot of times, is that they focus in on maybe their exact target rather than maybe people in and around them? A lot of times, I think the phrase is called weak ties. Those are the people that aren't directly connected, but they're around your periphery that you can maybe access a little easier, and then you could leverage that.
Well, 2 points to be made there. One is I define meetings as either strategic or non-strategic. A strategic meeting is where I already have in my mind how the two people would really enjoy, why they would really enjoy meeting and getting to know each other. A non-strategic meeting are ones where these are just two good people that I've just really enjoyed having a conversation with. And frankly, some of those meetings that I've set up that I had no idea up front, I just felt the vibes. I felt the body chemistry of the two of them. And some of those meetings have been some of the most fun, and some of the ones that have created amazing things that none of us had any idea prior to having the conversation. The second point, though, I was really influenced by research by a fellow named Mark Granovetter from Stanford. And the research that he had done showed that if you imagine a target and 3 circles with a bullseye being in the center, the bullseye represents your primary circle of contacts. Depending on the size of your network, that might be 3, 4, 5, maybe even 10 people who you're dealing with on a daily or at least a weekly basis. The second circle, the secondary one, are people who are coming in and out of that primary circle on a fairly regular basis, maybe every couple of weeks or every month. You just kind of reconnecting. Everyone in that third circle is what we would call a weak tie. They are someone who, over your lifetime, your career, you at one time had a good relationship with, but you've lost touch and contact. And so I literally make a habit every week. And if your listeners, if they do nothing else than follow up on this piece of advice, every week I go back through emails, through past correspondence, and I come up with 2 people, 3 sometimes, who I haven't talked with in usually 2 to 3 to 5, sometimes even 10 years. There's one individual that I'm now working with that, guess what? I may end up being an executive producer on a science fiction movie. It's too long to tell the tale, but he used to come to one of my book clubs. And he's now written a science fiction novel called The Cloud, which was considered the best science fiction book of 2023. And so who knows? It's just so much fun when you kind of approach net weaving more as a game than as something you have to do.
So what's kind of on the roadmap?
Well, I told you why I kind of dropped out of the game for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And when I decided to get back in, I said, you know what? This is my legacy. What do I want to leave as the legacy? And I got to thinking, years ago, I had developed something called the NetWeaver's Aptitude Assessment Quiz. And the new website that's going to be launched within the next week or so, which is NetWeavers Inspire, the first thing that will happen when you go to the website, you will take this free quiz. And first, the quiz has a series of statements, and you grade yourself from 1 to 10 on how applicable that statement is for you currently. The first category is your attitude towards the concept of altruism, doing something for someone without any expectation of how you're going to benefit. And so there's 5 questions there that are 5 statements, and you grade yourself from 1 to 10, with 10 being, boy, that's me. I do that all the time. Then the next 3 categories are the 3 skill sets of net weaving. Being a connector of others with their needs, problems, opportunities in mind rather than your own. Learning how to position yourself as a gratuitous resource for others, no expectation of gain. And the third, in line with the first 2, is building a trusted resource network made up of people who either you have vetted as being exceptional at what they do, or they come so highly recommended to you that you immediately trust and want to have them in that network. So part of what I wanted is I wanted to have a course. And so now we've developed a course online called the NetWeaver Diplomat. And the great thing about this is we've got it on a platform that allows me to translate it into over 100 different languages. So you come to the website, you take the free exam. If you like what you see, based on your score, because your score will either say you're a natural net weaver, been doing this all your life, you just never had a word for it. In fact, that's what Arthur Blank, the testimonial on the cover of my book, The Heart and Art of Net Weaving, said. The second category, a little lower score, is a net weaver in the wings. You see a few areas that you can improve upon. And then a net weaver's apprentice, meaning you see a lot of areas that you could improve on, but you love the concept and you want to improve. And then I struggled with, what do I call that bottom low score? So I finally came up with a politically acceptable, that's a net weaving skeptic. Oh, nobody does anything for someone without thinking of how they're going to benefit. And there's 2 areas of that. One is, though, people who are scoring low because they're just starting a career and they really have never thought of all these skill sets and ways. And that, for example, I've done a number of programs there at KSU's Executive MBA program. And part of where I really get excited is helping people launch a career with NetWeaving in mind. I sure wish I'd realized or been taught these skill sets coming right out of college. I don't know where I'd be today, but I know I would be even more above where I am today. So anyways, now those are the first two. You actually do upgrade to take the course and also have access to all 50 of the business book summaries. And I mean, these are Malcolm Gladwell, Dan Pink, Stephen M.R. Covey, Jeffrey Gitomer. These are some of the best business books out there that I, with author's permission, I wrote. And those are terrific as what I call follow up and follow through value added ways to add to the emails that you're sending out, either wanting to set up a meeting and providing information up front. You would ask, what's another way to set up a meeting? That's a great attachment to send an article that one of the book summaries that you know would be of interest to the high level individual you're trying to connect with. But the final area that I'm really excited about is I want to leave a legacy of inspiring people to create their own ripple effect stories, where you make a connection, you make an introduction, you host a meeting, and then those people, when they try and turn the table and say, Bob, this is great, but how can we help you? You simply ask them to pay it forward and do the same thing for someone else or someone's else. And it creates that ripple effect. And I want to create a whole library of stories by category of people who have done that and the amazing things that end up happening. So that's kind of the goal, is to create that platform and get people involved.
Now, how do you kind of explain this concept to a lot of the young folks who are not, I guess, I don't know if the word comfortable is the accurate word, but they don't do a lot of in-person conversations. They don't do a lot of even Zoom conversations now. They prefer more of the impersonal texting and, not in real life interactions. So how do you kind of help them either see the value or open their minds to this concept?
Well, actually, it's a great question because, frankly, I've created a new word called a catalyst connector. And in some cases, I hate to say it, Lee, but the new generation of young leaders, in many cases, are not comfortable with NetWeaving. And so another one of my goals is to create an army, and I've already got a number of people that are willing to fall into that role of actually calling up with the young people and showing them by doing it how to make those kind of connections. And frankly, it's a little bit the same with highly technical financial service people like CPAs and attorneys. And you know the jokes about an actuary, an outgoing actuary because he's looking at the other person's shoes rather than his own. And yet I've had some success stories with very highly analytical people by not just telling them how to do it, but actually showing. And that, to a little extent, is what we're going to be doing with this new project, Atlanta Way 2.0, where we're going to be using NetWeaving as a way to create to inspire leaders within the city of Atlanta to work on major projects together and collaborate and connect with each other in ways that they might even be uncomfortable doing, but we're going to make them.
It's so interesting because every person in business knows that referrals are kind of the key. And if you have a system for referrals, you're going to be in great shape. And then this just kind of aligns perfectly with that type of thinking.
Yeah, and we've only got a few minutes, so let me end with, or at least cover one thing that I think is so important, because a referral is a risk on the part of the person making it. You know that. You're not going to go to a networking event and have somebody immediately say, "Oh, my best client is so-and-so, let me make an introduction." You have to build trust. So I had quite a few people not quite a few, but a number of people who would come up to me at one of my talks and said, "Bob, I heard you speak a while back, and I had to be real honest with you. I've been doing a lot of your net weaving, and I'm not seeing little, if anything, come back." And so finally, I really developed a way to determine what the problem is. First, I'd ask them, "Tell me how you're doing it." And a lot of times what would come out is they're still networking. They're implying after they help someone, "Well, it sure would be nice if you happen to come across someone who needs my services. I'd love to have you refer me." You can't mix the two. Net weaving is not an attack on traditional networking. You have to do both to be successful, but you can't mix the two. The second reason I discovered was the world is made up of givers and takers. And when you net weave for a taker, they will take and take and take, and you can do it till the sun doesn't shine. And nothing will come back around because they're missing the reciprocity gene. The third one is the most interesting, though, and it's a weakness that we all have, especially if it's a high-level connection. So you introduce me to Arthur Blank. And guess what? I take ownership of that new relationship. And unless you follow up a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, "Hey, Bob, whatever happened to that introduction that I made with you? And oh my gosh, Lee, I forgot you were the one that introduced me to him. Gosh, I really am sorry. I never got back. He introduced me to so-and-so, and we're best friends." So we forget the girl that brought us to the dance. And I see that happen a lot. But frankly, Lee, there's one other category, and it's the hardest one. It's where you're having this conversation with someone, and deep down inside, you're saying to yourself, "I'm not really sure I would feel comfortable introducing this person to someone else." They didn't come across to you. Maybe it was their dress. Maybe it was vibes, whatever. But frankly, once again, a referral is a risk on the part of the person making it. And if they don't have confidence, what's the solution? They have to change their image. For some people, it may not be possible. But I make suggestions of taking different workshops on creativity, how to make yourself not just acceptable, but the wow factor. So somebody would say, "Wow, no one has ever done that for me before."
So if somebody wants to learn more, connect with the community, what is the coordinates? What is the website?
The website we're going to get there where you can get there one of three different ways. You can either go to netweaving.com, netweavinginternational.com, or the new NetWeavers Inspire, which will be launched within the next week or so. And once again, we hope that those who love this concept will spread the word and become ambassadors of the concept, because not only is it good for your business, but research has shown that there's such a thing as endorphins in the brain when you help someone that just gives you that satisfaction feeling, and that energizes you, makes you better at everything you do. It's a great way to build your business, but it's actually a great way just to live your life.
Well, Bob, thank you so much for sharing your story today. You're doing such important work, and we appreciate you.
Well, thank you again for having me, and let's stay in close touch. And remember, I want to have you involved in this Atlanta Way 2.0 as well. So we'll talk to you about that later. But thanks again for having me.
All right, this is Lee Cantor. We'll see you all next time on Atlanta Business Radio.